Well, hello and welcome to Cereal at Midnight. My name is Heath, and in this episode, let's talk about music. Specifically, I want to give you my thoughts on a brand new release. This is ELVIS Back in Nashville, a collection of studio masters from Elvis in Nashville in 1971, and they have been stripped of all the overdubs. Specifically, a lot of these tracks would end up on those early 70s albums that have such big horns and violins and way over the top, really big noises, really big sounds, right? They have been stripped of all that and returned to their original studio masters as recorded in Nashville. It's great, but I want to talk about it. So it's brand new, 1971 masters. This is a sequel to last year's From Elvis in Nashville, which was the beginning of the Nashville sessions that had started in 1970. I'll hold this up for you really quick if you want to try to freeze frame that. If you haven't seen this before, we did not review this here on the channel. So if you see a theme there, 1970 released in 2020, 1971 released in 2021, we're dealing with 50th anniversaries, right? 50-year anniversaries. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's just cool to celebrate things on their 50th anniversary and get stuff out of the vaults. But I think two, most importantly, I think it's UK copyright law dictates that if something has not been, if recordings have not been released or monetized in 50 years, they fall into the public domain. So you have all of these huge legacy recording artists like the Beatles and Pink Floyd and Bob Dylan does it every single year too. They're putting out these massive box sets of material, tours, live recordings, live performances. The Beach Boys did it this year. There's a Beach Boys box set that just came out. All the session outtakes and stuff, right? It's not just the released recordings, but it's session recordings, outtakes, the rehearsal chatter, all that stuff to keep it copyrighted so it doesn't fall into the public domain so that any willy-nilly company can release it and profit off of it. It makes sense, right? But we're getting some genuinely great releases because of that, and this is the latest one to come into the Cereal at Midnight headquarters. I wanted to talk about this because I love Elvis. If you've been following the channel, you know Elvis is very near and dear to me. And I think that it's cool because it gives a reappraisal of the most underappreciated era of Elvis's recording career. That may be controversial. I don't think that's a controversial statement. I think that's the given. That's what most people I think actually say. And even the liner notes here. There's an extensive booklet here with tons of information about the recording sessions and putting everything in context. The problem, if it is a problem, it's not for some people. The problem is Elvis was recording a lot of material, like it became like a factory. It just became this like churn, get it out, they would call it merchandise. Wasn't an album, it was merchandise. And that's, much has been written and said about Colonel Tom Parker and the money is the bottom line mentality. So Elvis never really had, especially during this time, Elvis never really had a Sgt. Pepper's album or a Pet Sounds album or even a Blonde on Blonde album because he wasn't going in the studio focusing on just let's do one album to the best of our ability, let's write the songs for it. He was taking submissions from all sorts of people, and they would go in the studio and they would knock out 40 songs in the course of a week or less sometimes. It was churning stuff out. But here's the thing: they would then take those masters that they had locked in, and some of those songs would not show up on albums for years. You got stuff recorded in 1970 that shows up in 1972, 1973. Stuff recorded here that shows up several albums later, several years later. And by the time they do show up, they've been the term is sweetened, but it's an ironic term because they would add violins and string sections and brass horns, and the choral, they would add choir and background vocals and the Imperials and all sorts of stuff. They would add these huge bombastic sounds to what was intimate stripped recordings. So Elvis Back in Nashville presents these recordings that are included in this box set from these sessions. They're all pulled from the same sessions in Nashville during 1971. They have removed all the overdubs. These are the master recordings. If background vocals were present, like in or around that time, those are here, but they've removed the horns, they've removed the added pianos or organs or whatever. This is what happened in the studio. And it allows us a reappraisal of what has been considered to be Elvis's decline in music. That was the thesis of this box set as well. Is that, hey, you know, people say that Elvis in the 70s was a shadow of the guy. You know, you have the hillbilly cat from the 50s that, you know, like burst rock and roll forth onto the national stage, and then you have the 60s, even this, you know, the Blue Hawaii stuff, the soundtrack material. Those songs are so fun, and even the later 60s, Suspicious Minds, all these things, Big Boss Man, they're so fun. Elvis in the 70s is a more somber, he really wanted to be taken seriously. He wanted to be like Sinatra, like Dean Martin. He wanted to be a vocalist, right? That came at the cost of some of it's just less commercially appealing music. It performed more poorly on the charts. This is a reappraisal. This is saying, hey, let's revisit the music as it was recorded and see what we think about it there. It is totally revisionist history. It is, especially when you consider that Elvis himself wanted those strings and the choirs and stuff. He wanted all those things added to the music. It wasn't like they did it behind his back. He knew what was going on. He was like, all right, whatever. So it is a reappraisal. It's revisionist history, but I really enjoy it. And it's not to say that everything is a hit or not everything connects, because there's some duds here. And then, again, the liner notes, like, this is the problem with having conversations like this, because there are going to be people who watch this who came to the Elvis of the 70s. That is their Elvis. They love the Elvis of the 70s. Joshua Jabkuga, the writer, the writer of Bubba Hotep and the Cosmic Bloodsuckers, who he adapted it from Joe R. Lansdale's original novel. He adapted that for comics. Bubba Hotep is, of course, what if Elvis faked his death and became like a monster hunter. He's a massive Elvis fan. He told me he prefers 70s Elvis to any other Elvis. So the problem, you know, like when I talk about something like this, these are me statements, right? But I think it is kind of the consensus among a lot of people is that Elvis in the 70s was not the Elvis of the 50s or the 60s. He was in a decline. And this allows us the opportunity to go back in there and revisit some of this stuff as it was recorded, and his voice takes center stage, and his voice was better than ever before. When you take some of the other stuff away, the songs that were kind of schmaltzy and syrupy and sickly sweet now sound kind of melancholy. He sounds lonely, he sounds sad, but there's so much emotion, so much power. It's really good stuff, but you can't save a bad track, and some of these songs just are not for him. And there's even one, he's like, I'm just not feeling this. I can't make this happen. So it's fly on the walls. We get some recording chatter, we get some studio chatter, but it allows us to see through all the 50 years of schmaltz and the sweetening. You know, the Beatles did it with the, you know, hey, we're all talking about the Beatles, right? Because there's the new documentary about the Let It Be sessions. That album notoriously had so much stuff added to it. You take all that away like they did with Let It Be Naked, and it's almost like a whole other album. You're like, whoa, this has so much more power than I remember having. So there's real value for this. I don't know where they're going to go next, because, you know, so a few years ago they did a box set for the 68 comeback special to keep that material copyrighted. Then his stand at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. Then this, and now this. But the thing is, Elvis did not record in Nashville after 1971. Now, some of the musicians that were on those tracks would record with him in other places, but he never went back to Nashville to record. He kind of hung out in the Memphis area, and he was touring. You know, he was doing he was an active touring musician. So I don't know what we're gonna get next, but I'm glad that this stuff keeps coming. I should also say some of the musicians associated with this are some of the earliest founders of the Muscle Shoals sound, who after this success, the foundational success of fame and that whole Muscle Shoals scene, take it up to Nashville, become session musicians. This is great playing here, absolutely stellar playing. So if you like this kind of thing, I recommend you check it out. I think every Elvis fan has this on their Christmas list this year, because there's nothing else like it. And for history, for curation, for preservation, this is an amazing box set. I even love the size of these. You know, they look like the master recording, the reel-to-reel tapes. As someone who's old enough to have owned reel-to-reel albums and material. I had a reel-to-reel player when I was a teenager, and they look like, as I showed what I'm talking about here. This looks like the box that this stuff came in. These look the same size and everything. I just love it. So this is a new box set. If you let me know what you think about it. Furthermore, music is clearly near and dear to my heart. I'm saying this more and more. Like, we don't talk a whole lot about. We used to talk about music more, but it just doesn't seem to hit with as many people as it used to. But I am hearing from more and more of you who are saying, like, oh, I love the music stuff. Keep it coming. So we will. But I want to know you're out there. I want to hear from you. So let me know that you enjoy this. Let me know you got something out of this. Guys, Elvis, Back in Nashville, 1971. Out now. Let me know what you think about it. Guys, thanks so much. Take care. Until next time, here's where to go and what to do.